Okay, recorded, started.
All right. Let's see if I can see some names. We've got people from all over North America. I see some Europe. I'm seeing some Hong Kong. I see some Asia. This is amazing. I'm so impressed on a Saturday for most people that we are at ACR virtually. Really exciting. So glad that everybody could make it today. If you're here, you are either like us and you really love language already, or you're at least lingo curious. We love talking about text. We love talking about language, and it's great to see we've got it looks like 160 people in trending out kind of sharing interest in this. My name's Grant. On behalf of Sarah and Jonah and Anne, I welcome you and thanks for coming. I'd really like to thank Anne and Anne Kronrod in particular. She's kind of the champion of these sessions, both this year and last. If you don't know Anne, she's the only formally trained linguist I'm aware of in the consumer research field, and she really knows her stuff. So thanks to Anne especially today. I'm going to kind of introduce you to the agenda. We're going to talk about methods of linguistic inquiry for the first half hour, maybe a little shorter, just to kind of, for some of you, you'll be familiar with some, but you'll have forgotten that, yeah, these are really about language and linguistics, and others are kind of some of the more cutting edge techniques that we're using. We're then gonna try breakout groups, which may be a little tricky given we're such a large group, but we're gonna try to have a little bit of fun brainstorming on kind of applying methods to language problems. We're then going to come back, regroup, and see what we came up with, and then leave some time for some conversation, some questions, some ideas, some answers. Anne has created, if you're interested in this space, a great Facebook group. It's called Language Research and Marketing. If you're already a Facebook user, you can just type that into the search bar and find the group. And I think she needs to kind of let you in, but you can then participate in that. We post resources or conversations going on there. People can ask questions, all kinds of great stuff. And then Ashley Humphreys just created a website that you see the link at the bottom there called Text Analysis Resources, where,
Grant,
yes.
the window that you're sharing does not show the presentation moving. So you were saying the agenda without the, yeah. You might need to just share the screen. It's really annoying.
Okay, let me try again.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yep. That's better. Okay, so I've been talking about our agenda, half hour talking about method, breakouts, regroup results, Q&A. There you see at the bottom there the name of the Facebook group for Language Research and Marketing, and the web link Text Analysis Resources, which is a site that Ashley Humphreys, who has a great JCR on text analysis methods and consumer research. She's started to kind of post some links there. We've also posted in the chat a kind of one pager with some new links that will likely end up on Ashley's website as well. You can find some tools, ideas on different methods and approaches. To give you some background, we did hosted a similar forum last year that was really fun, where we really kind of introduced linguistic theory. And linguistics is a huge field, all kinds of different spaces, but talked about some of the basic ideas from linguistics that maybe we as consumer researchers don't think about very often. Words like polysemy and morphemes, and you know, what exactly is pragmatics, and how might that be kind of relevant and related to, you know, you could link it to psychology or to sociology or other kind of approaches. Anne has posted a video on YouTube that it's about 8 minutes long that summarizes that if you weren't able to attend and you're interested. And I imagine you can also access that from the Facebook group.
All the links are available in the chat, by the way.
And in the chat too. Today we're going to kind of move to method and kind of introduce or remind ourselves of all the different ways you could use language or study language. You know, again, you could use language to study your particular theory of interest, or you could be interested in language phenomena itself using all these different kind of methods. And of course, you know, we're doing this as a field, and we've been doing it for many years. But just to give a couple examples, Anne has done some neat work where she looks at how figurative language, kind of more emotional language, has different effects based on whether you're talking about more hedonic versus more utilitarian products. And Matt Rockledge, who I know is here today, has some interesting, very recent work on how positive emotion can backfire when you're writing product reviews. We have, work in decision making, where verbs, when they come in kind of different stimuli, can put you in a more action or movement or process orientation. Sarah Moore, who's here today, has really neat work on how the language you use to describe product as experiences can impact your own attitudes, change your how you think about products. We've got LJ and Tina Lori did great work quite a while ago, really some of the founders of language work in the marketing context, looking at phonetic structure and sound and how that influences cognition. We have work in psychology, Ryan Boyd and Jamie Pennebaker. Really, if you don't know Jamie Pennebaker and his colleagues yet, that's a great place to start to really get to understand Luke and how language, in their initial explorations, was really about how language can help us see personality. Find out who's Machiavellian, who's depressed, other kind of emotional features of individuals. And then Jonah and I have work in culture where we've looked at how kind of the drive for novelty shapes interest in music products, and Jonah's doing work in movies, and other work that's looked at stereotypes across different cultures, ethnic and gender stereotypes. So lots of work going on in marketing and consumer research and psychology, kind of that's closely related to us. And of course, the other social sciences, the CCT kind of folks like Ashley Humphreys doing work in this space. And I would encourage you to think of us, this is a really neat opportunity, because I would say, and I think the kind of co-panelists here would agree, that consumer research to some extent is leading the charge, I think, amongst psychology researchers and looking at causal relationships. So not only describing how people use language and how they learn language, but what are the consequences of language on the speaker and on another individual? Why do we speak certain ways? This is a space where I really think we are kind of on the cutting edge of doing this kind of work. So I'd encourage you to say, let's really kind of jump into this and make this a space that the whole world of social sciences thinks of, consumer research really knows their language. What's going to happen next is we're going to go into these kind of 7 different methodological spaces from linguistic inquiry. Some of them you're familiar with, but may just not have thought of as language kind of manipulations or language approaches. Sarah will introduce us to some of those kind of basic ideas, and will bring us some of the more kind of linguistic based methods that we may not see as often, or some of them we do. And then Jonah's going to talk about some of the more natural language processing, the NLP, the kind of more automated approaches that we're starting to get excited about in the field. So with that, I think I turn it over to Sarah.
All right, so we're starting well because I remembered to unmute myself, which is always the first barrier. So I'm going to start talking about experiments, which we thought would be a good place to start, as most of us are very familiar with them. Experiments are how I started doing work on language. And they're useful because, as we know, they're very flexible. They're particularly flexible when you're thinking about language, because language has this very cool property where it has a bidirectional relationship with the stuff that goes on inside our heads. So thought, attitudes, intentions, emotions are reflected in the language that we use, the words that we choose, and the words that we use, or the words that we read, that we hear in conversation, that we see in ads, that we see in online reviews. Those words, that language, can also influence our attitudes, our intentions, our emotions. So because there's this bidirectional relationship, you can use experiments to explore language as an independent variable or as a dependent variable. And in both of those ways, you can use experiments, as we always use experiments to do, to demonstrate causation. So you can show for either of those two links that, yes, we're manipulating people, what people think or feel, and that's changing the language that they use, or we're changing the language that they use or that they're exposed to, and that's having some impact on something else, some other attitude. So we're going to walk through an example first of manipulating language as an independent variable. And you can do this, again, in a bunch of flexible ways. So when you're using language as an independent variable, the easiest way to think about it is that you're going to show somebody something, an ad, an online review, a public service announcement to wear face masks, and you're going to manipulate the language that appears across conditions to those participants. So here's an example. We're going to do a quick poll. This is work that I did with a former doctoral student, Katie Lafreniere, and Robert Fisher. So Katie is interested in swear words in online word of mouth as a category of language and how they can be used and what they mean. So which one of the following do you find more helpful if you read this sentence in an online review? This dishwasher is fucking quiet, or this dishwasher is extremely quiet. Which one of those, besides being funny, which one of those is more impactful? Which one is more helpful? I didn't know it would appear live. That's very cool.
But is that biasing subsequent results?
I guess Zoom has not thought of that.
I think only Sarah can see. I think then.
Oh, okay.
You have to publish it, and then I think everyone can see it.
I can see.
Only hosts can see it, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have not quite everybody's voted yet.
It's really slowed down though. That may be all you get.
Yeah, you can just probably publish it. Yeah.
Okay, and it hasn't changed in a while. So interestingly, do I click share? Anne, are you going to click share?
Ready?
Yep. I'm kind of surprised.
Well, they didn't have the context.
It's true. So all of our studies say that the swear word wins. It's more helpful. We have field data where we did some text analysis on Yelp and Amazon, and a whole bunch of studies where the only thing we're changing, we're manipulating swear word use and comparing that to other word use, like fucking versus extremely. We write an online review. We show people between conditions, those different words. That's the only thing that changes. And then we say, how helpful is this? How strongly does the reviewer feel about their dishwasher being fucking quiet? And then we measure how that change in language as an independent variable influences attitudes, purchase intentions, etc. Now you can also, and this is trickier, manipulate people's production of language as an independent variable. This is hard to do because language is really slippery. So if you say to people in condition A, I would like you to write an online review that's emotional, and people in the second condition, I would like you to write an online review that's really rational, that's hard for people to do. And if you let them, they'll write kind of whatever they want. Often on MTurk, they'll write meow, 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 meow. Every time I do a study on MTurk asking people to write an online review, somebody pastes a whole bunch of meows. It just happens every time. What you can do if you want to manipulate people's word production is use more like fill in the blanks. So you give them a story shell or a sentence where you're guiding what you want them to say. And that's one way that you can manipulate language use as an independent variable. You can also measure language as a dependent variable. So let's say you're interested in how sad versus angry people use words. You can manipulate, do an emotion induction, and then get them to produce some language and see how that initial independent variable changes their language production. And you can do that by getting them to type and then using text analysis programs to analyze the text that they produced in the different conditions. You can also, next slide, use language as a dependent variable in a more structured way by giving people choices of sentences or words. So again, the assumption here is that the words that we're choosing, so if I let you type a whole bunch of stuff, the words that you're using there are a reflection of the independent variable that we've manipulated, whatever that is, emotions, goals. But you can do this in an easier way by building the DV for people. So you create a whole bunch of sentences and you let them choose one of them. And then you measure between conditions if there's a difference in that choice share. So imagine that you buy a hat and you find that it is unique and special. You really love your hat. It's the kind of hat that the Queen of England would wear. And you want to tell other people about it. So this is work that Anne is doing on the preciseness of language. So if you're going to tell other people how amazing and unique you think this hat is, which of those sentences would you pick if you're telling somebody else?
All right, we're slow down. And the results.
Right.
There you go.
And your prediction is correct.
Because it doesn't depend on the group.
Well, Meg, I do think people have lay theories about how people are going to respond to swear words. As it turns out, feeling offended and thinking other people are going to be offended doesn't actually change how helpful the review is. But there are generational differences in how offended people say they are if they're swearing in reviews. That's an aside. So for this one, Anne's prediction is that when things are more unique and special, you're going to use more precise language to talk about not just the product attributes, but you're going to use more precise language. So you're going to say summer instead of warm overall in talking about that unique object. So you can use this to demonstrate how and why people are choosing particular words. Now, this one's a little challenging because it's within subjects in some sense, the DV, and so it can be harder to, you want to design those choice options very carefully. All right, last slide that's mine is about language production. So this is a whole process. Language production has a bunch of related stages. You start with a thought. You want to express that thought. You decide what words you're going to use. You decide how those words are going to go together in a sentence. And then you decide how you're actually going to express that thought. Are you going to talk? Are you going to type? Are you going to sing? If you're going to type, are you going to use emoji? You're going to use emoticons, or you're going to use actual words. So there is a lot of research that you could do if you wanted to look just at language production itself. Anne and her colleagues have done some cool work on phonetic embodiment, so how we literally produce language and how our attitudes change when we're pronouncing brand names that where we produce the sounds from front to back in our mouths versus from back to front. There's also been some cool work that has compared different types of expressions. So Shen and Sengupta have a neat JCR article where they look at how connected people feel to brands that they're writing word of mouth about when they're typing versus speaking. So you can pull apart different pieces of language production. You could compare different stages. You could look at the relationships between stages. So there's lots, again, to do here, and lots of it you could do in the form of an experiment. On to Anne.
Word listings as opposed, I suppose, to word choice or sentence choice that Sarah described before, is a kind of a more less controlled process. You ask people, or you just let people kind of just write out something that they write. They write lists of words. They just write out stuff without specifically talking about something or thinking about a particular choice that they are making. So it's kind of a less kind of subconscious kind of choice. And the idea is to see what comes kind of higher in our mind, or more what thoughts are more accessible in our mind as an effect of some sort of manipulation or some sort of aspects. So for example, self-monitors, people who are very kind of control freaks for themselves, they have kind of, there are words that would be more accessible in their mind, and they would be in a free word flow kind of tasks. They will be writing words that are more dealing with self-presentation concepts as and competitive word listing induces stereotypes. So if you have to word list, it's since stereotypes are kind of, they reside in a less on a more subliminal level in our minds, that's when they come out, when you just have to write out stuff. I'm ready to go to the next slide. Another method to try and detect people's way of reacting to language or using language as a result of some states is an automatic measure. where you need special software for that, and we have it shared in the file that that I shared before. It's an open source kind of method where the idea behind that is that you would be reacting faster to things that are already somewhere high on in your accessibility, things that are salient to you. The IAT also uses automatic reaction time implicit measure. So for example, I'm going to show you, and Grant is going to run through a couple of a few pictures now, and then I will be launching a poll, and what I would need you to do is to react as fast as possible and just click one of the two options that I'm going to ask you. These are very simple questions, but right now you're all, I think, muted, or most of you. I would be showing you photos, and I would just need you to say kind of out loud, or if you don't want to, then just say for yourself, say what you see on the picture. Ready?
Smile.
Teeth.
Teeth. Yes, teeth.
Yeah.
Next.
Dress.
Wedding dress.
Bridal
Dress.
dress.
Bride.
Bride.
Ice cream.
Vanilla.
Ice cream.
Vanilla ice cream.
Sugar.
Corn flour.
Flower.
Flower.
And one more, I think.
Flower.
Snow.
Snow.
Oh,
Awesome.
Trail.
Are you ready for the poll? Remember, as soon as possible. Yes? Ready?
Yeah.
What does a cow drink? Quickly. Excellent. So once you had a chance to think just a little bit, let me show you what you did. In the beginning, you didn't see how it went, but in the beginning, the milk was up all the way to the side, and less people said water.
Yeah,
And
it was really neat. You could just totally see it change.
yeah. So maybe we see it in the recording. I don't know. Okay, let me get rid of the. Sorry.
no order effects for that.
Sorry.
No order effects for that. Would you see the same if milk was the second option? I'm guessing, yeah. But.
Well, in research, I don't have this opportunity here, and I didn't have the opportunity to show it, but yes, of course, you have to exchange the order.
Okay,
so what happened? I showed you a lot of white things, right? Yeah. Grant, you can go to the next. So I showed you a lot of white stuff, and after that I asked the question, and white things, including milk, were just at the top of the mind at that point. And once you thought about it just a little bit more, you realize that this is a trick question, and you put the water. So overall, I can say that everybody here thinks logically and knows what cows drink, but at first it was kind of, I was able to sway, and someone just said in the chat, because cows are associated with milk. Yes, of course. That's one of the reasons. But if I didn't show you all these pictures, you wouldn't be saying milk. I mean, you would say water in the first place. Next. So what we do with this is the content analysis. You went a little bit. Yeah, sorry. So what we do here, we show that certain meanings and certain words reside in the mind at a higher level of accessibility, and we can, with priming or with other activities, we can increase or decrease the accessibility of the different meanings in the mind, and in this way we can see how they persuade or how they influence people's reactions. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Jonah. Oh, no, this is still you. Sorry.
Yeah, I think so. Another way or another method is completely different. Like, forget everything I said so far, is completely different. This is a way to gauge, to try to learn about the way people use language or how language expresses thought. It's a more qualitative way. It's called content or discourse analysis, but it's very useful because you get much deeper into things. And from content or discourse analysis, you can see what topics kind of people talk about, what's on people's minds, how people kind of, I said it's qualitative, it's less numerical, but you can learn about more of the quality specifically of how people talk about things. And I think the next method is actually the total kind of reverse of this method.
Perfect. So thank you, Anne. And I think just before I dive into text analysis, one thing I think is interesting to think about just conceptually is sort of, what are you interested in, right? Are you interested in a topic and you're going to use language to study that topic? Are you interested in a topic and you're going to use text analysis to study that topic? You're actually not as interested in language itself. Or are you interested in language per se, and you're going to use one of these methods to study these topics? And obviously, many of us are interested in multiple aspects of this. We're interested in both language and text analysis. Some of us may be interested more in one than the other. But I think what's neat to think about in the things we've laid out so far is there's a lot of different methods to try to get some understanding of a space or area. And so we'll do this in the breakouts in a couple of minutes, but I think part of the goal here is to say, hey, what is it that I'm interested in, and how can I use these different methods to get there? So for me, I think text analysis is quite neat. For those of us that are interested in moving beyond experiments, and we have large corpuses of field data, which would be really difficult to manually code. Right? I've done projects, for example, where I had very diligent RAs code 3,000 New York Times articles. That was exhausting. They hated me by the end of it. Much easier to automate it, and also much more objective. Right? Particularly for some of the things we're interested in measuring, it's very subjective, maybe large variance across people, or it might be things that people can't even see themselves, right? It may be things that when they look at it, they may have a hard time judging what it is. And that's really where text analysis, automated text analysis can come in. And so the key insight here, or key idea, is that language provides insight into people and culture, but it's hard to parse, as we said, at scale. And so automated measures can both increase objectivity and quantify a range of interesting features. And honestly, I don't think automated measures are the best all the time. Right? If you have a small set of primarily experimental data where there's no good off-the-shelf tool to measure what you're interested in, manual coding may be a lot better, but it may not be. And there are some ways and situations in which automated approaches can be a lot better and more useful. And you can also check validity by looking, Jeff just said the same thing I was about to say, thank you, Jeff, by looking at both, right? So saying, hey, let me take a concrete dictionary, for example, that's out there already, let me run it on some data, and let me also make sure that correlates with individuals' perceptions. It may not always correlate with individuals' perceptions. There may be cases where it may be hard for people to imagine certain things, but at least seeing a nice correlation there can be helpful. And so Grant and I have a paper forthcoming in JCR on concreteness, where we look at customer service calls. So imagine you call an airline, you say, you lost my bag, I'm so upset. How do they make you satisfied with that interaction? Not only what they give you, obviously they find your bag, but how do they make you feel in that interaction? Do you feel like they're listening? And the role that language can do to help there. Meg, to your question, the evaluative lexicon is Matt Rockledge's wonderful dictionary that sort of tries to tease apart different evaluations, both valence, or things positive and negative, but also evaluations based more on emotion or cognition. So you can, for example, have two words, both of them that are very positive, right? But one is a more emotionally laden word and one is a more cognitive word. And so definitely check out his dictionary there. I'm getting to some, everyone's questions on different things on the bottom of the slide, which is great. So hopefully my co-organizers here will
yeah, I'm answering. Yeah.
along the way. Most of you are probably familiar with Luke. I think Luke is great and broad. In some cases, it's not as reliable as some new dictionaries that have come out, some higher tech methods that have come out. But what's great about it is it's broad and it's easily accessible, right? Really easy to run some basic tools. Concreteness, there are also some nice accessible ways to look at concreteness. Matt's evaluative lexicon is hugely easy to use. We have a website that runs concreteness and a bunch of other things that I think are in the resources as well, useful to use for dictionaries. And obviously most work that most of us have seen have used dictionaries, right? Easy to measure first person, second person pronouns, and some of the other things. Topic modeling is a little more complicated, a little bit less accessible, but really useful for understanding underlying themes. So rather than you saying ahead of time, hey, this is my dictionary, I'm going to fix words that are in this dictionary, what topic modeling says is give me a whole bunch of documents, whether they're songs, customer service calls, movies, and let the data tell me what the main themes are, rather than prescribing those themes. You can do a more sort of seeded or guided LDA. Olivier Tubia has some nice work, and others do as well, where you use sort of some starting points to help the model figure out what the topics might be, or you can completely allow it to emerge from the data itself. Grant and I have a psych science from a few years ago. We do that with songs data and let the data tell us, hey, girls in cars, for example, are a theme that's sung a lot in country music. Word and document embeddings, I have to tell you, if you have not played around with these, I highly recommend at least looking into them. They're really cool. They're not as useful for a broad set of applications. They're not as easily accessible as some of the other methods that are up here, particularly dictionaries, but I would say they're great for measuring the distance between things. So there's a nice PNAS paper from a couple years ago looking at measuring stereotypes over time in hundreds of years of New York Times articles and books by looking at the distance between male and female words and various occupations and other things. Rehana Bogati and myself have a paper doing the same thing with song lyrics, looking at misogyny in music over time. So if you're interested in measuring the distance between things, can be a really useful tool for that. Any of you are familiar with LSA, coherence measures, sort of looking at document coherence over time. You can actually do the same thing with embeddings, document embeddings, not just word embeddings, to look at how similar two chunks of a document are. So really neat toolkit there. And there's also readability, which is sort of how readable a document is. Grant, if you wouldn't mind clicking one more ahead. So computational linguistics, CL, that's what we mean when we are talking about computational linguistics. The idea here is language can be represented and computed by formulas and mathematical expressions. So this is things like WordNet, this is things like concreteness, these are things like how to detect metaphors in text. And the idea here is basically similar to some of these other approaches. Essentially at the core, language can be broken down into math. Right? Words can be represented as numbers and you can look at the relationship between those things. That's, by the way, why it's so important in some of these tools to make sure the first letter isn't capitalized, right? Because in some of these tools, if the first letter of a word is capitalized versus not, it treats it as a completely different unit. Right? And so we need to make sure to think about data cleaning and so on there. And so there's just a couple examples at the bottom here. And Anne, by the way, knows a lot more about computational linguistics than me. So if you're interested, please ask her. But if you're interested in measuring stories, for example, in product reviews, you wouldn't just want to look at the number of first person pronouns, right? Because those may not be stories. You would want to look at that interacted with past tense. The more that people are talking about themselves in past tense, the more that's a good measure of a story. For example, the more I'm talking about a first person pronoun in present tense, the more likely that is to be my evaluation of something. And so we can extract some of these ideas of stories from stories and evaluations from some of these different things. Okay, so next slide. So thank you guys for bearing with us. We wanted to make sure to get through enough content before we talked about doing something with that content. But teaching myself at the moment, I recognize just sitting there and listening eventually gets old. So we'd like to do the following. We're going to break everybody out into 4 breakout rooms. Each one of us is going to be in one of those rooms. And we've got as a group a couple of assignments that we're wrestling with. So essentially, we're going to try to tackle at least 2. We'll see how we do. Probably have about 20 minutes. 2 research questions and think about the methods that we just talked about and how we might use those methods to answer those questions. And so the goal is less one specific theory, but more let's think about how we could or could not apply each of these methods to a given situation. We want to give you a better sense of, hey, if I had a particular question, what among the tools I have in my tool belt should I use? right? Is this a thing where I should go to word embeddings or use reaction time or something else? And so we'll do some Zoom polling and hand raising to vote for the based approach in each of these groups. And then at the end, we'll regroup and share the 4 method recommendations and turn to a Q&A. Fantastic. So I think someone's going to hit a magic button and we're all going to be sorted to different rooms, but we look forward to seeing you back here in a couple of minutes.
Just a quick question. Do we want to present the questions, the research questions, or we are presenting them in the...
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. I think we'll also present them in the room, but we'll do them a quick overview first. So language and emotion, do we think happy customers use different language and word of mouth compared to sad customers? How might we measure that? That's question 1. If we move on to question 2, who shapes the evolution of brand personality more, consumers or marketers? And so can we measure brand personality over time? How would we do that? And how would we see who's influencing it? I think there's at least 1, if not 2 more. Does verb impact choice? So thousands will be saved by this vaccine versus this vaccine will save thousands. Expert choose the Fitbit versus 3 versus Fitbit versus 3 is the expert choice. So passive versus active voice. And maybe 1 more.
That's it.
That's it.
I think that's all we got. Yeah.
Okay. So we will be shifted to rooms amazingly through the power of Zoom and look forward to seeing you there. Thanks. Oh, sorry, 20 minutes, Meg, around 20 minutes. And I think Anne will tell us when to stop.
Does it work for everybody to join a room? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
I'm not seeing it, but sometimes it takes a while to ripple through.
Okay. Okay, I'll join. I'll stop the recording here.
You know, if we use things like Luke is generally good, but we just have to be aware of the type of things it's trained on and whether that situation or context is similar or not to the context we're looking in. This is always why sort of dictionaries for a particular context are always going to be better. It's more complicated to do and we have to show that it's actually robust, but we just need to be aware of the fit between the context in which something was generated and the context in which we're using it. And someone just said spatio-temporal as well. Good point. Yes.
Yeah. What I found neat in my breakout was how easily we were able to come up with experiments for all 3. And you know, I kind of go to text analysis and field data first often, and then turn to experiments. But it was really neat to see that you could really try to think about a complex problem like how brand personality changes over time using experiments, right? Which I thought was great.
They're also which is why we started with them, they're a less challenging way to start. So if you do an experiment and you find something, then you can tackle where's the text going to come from? How am I going to scrape it? How am I going to clean it up? How am I going to analyze it? When you already have some idea that there's something there because you've tested it at least once.
And did you guys see anything in your breakout?
We took the advice, Jeff's advice to use a multi-method approach and focused on one question and kind of tested it from different perspectives, from different sides. We're trying to see how language can influence the way we make assumptions about personality of brand personality. And there were suggestions for word choice to describe the brand, or text analysis to describe the brand, to test reaction time to words that are associated, like the brand, I don't know, Nike, and then how fast you react to different words like speed versus elegance, things like that. Topic modeling or word embeddings, TF-IDF, different ways to try and see what words repeat more times, more frequently, or type of words as an effect of different circumstances. I think that's it for now.
Can I make a quick suggestion? We only have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has a question, type them in the chat and maybe we'll call out a couple of them. And if not, we can try to answer some of them later. But if anyone has sort of questions, we can try to get to them and maybe even stay a couple minutes after, depending.
There were a few questions here that were about other languages other than English, or writing other than the Roman letters. I think this is a very kind of it's an important question. It's a problem in linguistics in general because most of the examples come from English, and as you probably know, languages are very different in many aspects. It's a question. I don't have an answer, but it is a question. It's a problem that can be solved sometimes, and sometimes it cannot. Someone asked if I have like a database, or my whole research is not in English, is there a chance I will be able to publish in top level journals? In linguistics, at least, if you don't show the universality of your phenomenon by showing that it works in different languages, it's kind of, then your research is about this particular language, and that's something that you need to take into account when you do research.
I'm really excited by the idea of bilinguals, and I haven't done work in that space, but I think that might help you, like English and some other language, might make it more viable for the journal. And I've seen some designs where you've got, English speakers versus Mandarin speakers and conditions, and then you've got bilinguals, English, Mandarin in a condition. And the bilinguals are really an interesting, it's almost like a twin study to think about, okay, when somebody has two different modes of thought and expression, what does that mean? And certainly in consumer and marketing contexts, it's a really important thing. It matters here in Canada because we have English and French. I'm sure in many countries in Europe, you have different languages appearing, and certainly all over the world. So to me, it's a really neat opportunity for somebody to pick up.
And I think it also depends on your research question. So if what you are studying and the constructs you're interested in and the aspect of language you're interested in is specific to that language, and it may or may not apply or spill over, that might be more challenging. But if you're using it to demonstrate, if you're using the language maybe as a DV, then as along with other studies to show the same pattern or the same outcome or something, then I think it would be more easy to publish. So I think it depends on the context and what you're actually studying, whether it would be publishable.
Rehane Bagradi, she works at Penn right now, has mentioned she's used word embeddings for different languages, which is really neat. So it's interesting to think some of especially the NLP, the quantitative approaches, don't really care about the underlying language, right? They look for strings of text that they turn into quantitative units. And so that may be a good approach to go if you're dealing with foreign languages, because there aren't as many dictionary tools that I'm aware of for other language. And so you may need to go to the topic modeling. So. Yeah,
it looks like Rehana's here. So if anyone wants to ask her, please follow up with her directly. She's chatting in the chat. Sorry, Rehana, I didn't realize you were here. So please follow her directly, and she can probably talk to you more about that stuff.
And I think Luke and lots of the other dictionary programs are adding more other languages. Like they've been expanded.
Yeah, I'm just going over the questions here. There are many. Any other questions, guys?
Hey, hi. Just want to add one more thing about other languages. There are a lot of research on Chinese Mandarin in NLP if you are looking at that language too. I'm going to just mute that.
Yeah, Rehan is a computer scientist, so if you're interested in the CS literature on this stuff, she knows much more about it than at least me by far. Emojis, funny that you asked. Our world expert on emojis is somewhere here.
Is she still here?
In the squares. Do you want to talk a bit about your stuff on that? Would that be?
I think you're talking about me, but I guess I don't know.
I don't think there's another world expert on emojis. Maybe there are two world experts on emojis here. Yeah.
Well, lots of people have studied emojis. So yeah, I look at what's called textual paralanguage. So I'm looking at nonverbal expressions in text. And we are working on essentially a tool that can automatically classify various aspects of nonverbals in text. So we look at different vocal qualities, things like pitch fluctuation in text. A lot of research has shown how pitch affects other things like perceptions of dominance and things like that. And so we're capturing some of those things in text. So that tool will be published on Jonah and Ashley's site. So, and if you're interested to know more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share it with you.
And just to also mention, since Andrew sort of mentioned things like pitch and tone, we've talked today about language as words. And she's talking about textual paralanguage, which is things like emojis. There's also just paralanguage, which is things like pitch and tone and things along those lines. There's less work, at least that I've seen, doing that in that type of space. It looked like this guy, Michael Lowe, who I've never met before, but looks like he's doing interesting things. Maybe you're here somewhere, Michael, and it looks like he's doing a couple things in that space, at least that were presented at the conference. He's at Georgia Tech. Alex Van Zant, who's at Rutgers in management, is doing some neat work on paralanguage. And there are a smaller set, but a set of people doing some work on voice that might be interesting for folks here as well.
Very cool. Well, we're a couple minutes past time. Jonah, do you want to, I don't know, just
I was supposed to wrap up. That was my job. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Yeah, so I think just even just stepping back, first of all, thank you for coming. I think that's clear, but more generally, it'd be great to build community around these things. And so I think, we're trying to put together some resources. If you see things on the resource page that are missing that you'd love to see added, please let us know. Great to put together more sessions and things about this in the future. I think as Grant and others said early on, there's a big opportunity here. And I think because it's a little bit of an interdisciplinary area, a really opportunity for marketing and CB in particular to take some ownership of that area. It's great to see so much interest in this space. Please check out the Facebook group, the resources, other links that we have today. Thank you guys so much for coming. And hopefully we'll see you back at this next year again at ACR in person. So thank you guys so much and hope to see you soon.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. See you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing the resources. Like this, that was
Yes.
actually super helpful. And all in one place. I have some of them, but not in one place in one document. That's
Helpful for me too. I'm like, hey, I didn't know about that one.
So that was actually the most practical thing I've gotten out of an ACR ever. So thank you guys.
Yay.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Thanks for coming, Kristen. Hey, Jason.
Thanks, guys. And I really enjoyed that you guys kind of followed up on last year's. I mean, that's kind of nice to see also evolution of things.
Yeah, we got to think about what we're going to do next year. What's the next step? I don't know.
I'm sure you guys will come up with something exciting.
Reviewing papers. Okay.
Sign language and consumer research. It will be completely
honestly, for
silent.
these sessions that are based on tools, you kind of don't need to do a completely different session every year. You can kind of do the same session slightly updated with some different questions. There'll be different people. There'll be new resources that'll be on the thing. Like
Well, yeah, the tools change so much.
Yeah.
So fast.
Yeah.
Well, and the accessibility, I think Grant was saying in the chat, right? Like, yeah, like a lot of his stuff becoming more accessible with R packages. And as long as you kind of learn how to put stuff in R, like things get, more.
Yeah. Ideas on this. I'd love it because we've been thinking about this a lot also. To me, I think the big barrier to this field is just accessibility, right? Like the reason everybody uses Luke is not that Luke is the best thing. It's good, but that it's just so easy to use.
So easy. Yeah.
So, we did this little textanalyzer.org thing to try to make some other things easier to use. And there is, I think, some topic modeling in that. Grant is right that you can do it in R. I don't know that most people that were here today feel as comfortable with R as Grant does. It's great that he does, and some people do, but like I wouldn't feel as comfortable with R. And so, I think accessibility is really the barrier. So things like the resources are great, things like off-the-shelf tools that make some of this stuff easier. But to me, that's just one of the barriers of adoption in this space is not interest, it's accessibility.
Yeah, I think to that end, I mean, I've been thinking about these types of tools for some time, but I'm not sure where to get started, and so I think the resource list is wonderful. In terms of reading, is there a particular paper or a particular person who I should look at in terms of just kind of getting my feet wet?
Ashley and Rebecca Wang's paper is phenomenal. Like it's a great first read.
Ashley Humphreys?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's in the PDF resource list.
2018 JCR, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean for text analysis or for linguistic methods?
It's she's more text analysis, but she also talks qualitative methods like content and discourse analysis. She doesn't get into linguistic theory at all. Well, maybe she touches on it a tiny bit, but it's more, you know, practically, if you wanted to study consumer phenomena, and how might you approach it, you know, that kind of thing.
I'm biased, but there's also a 2020 JM piece that a few that may also be may or may not be useful, but I think Ashley's is definitely useful.
I definitely love the title of your piece there, like uniting the tribes, because I think that I felt that before for other methods, but and then it didn't happen. But I'm still holding up hope that, you know, like there could be more communication between tribes, because we're using, or at least are somewhat more understanding of like the common methods we're using. So,
but this, I mean, like, and you see even in the individual breakouts, like someone's talking about discourse analysis, like that's something that I don't know how to do. But to me, like some of these methods are quantifying, and some people would say it's not good, but you know, discourse analysis, and hopefully there's value in each of the approaches, quantifying parts of it and other parts you can't, but hopefully we'll see. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, have a good Saturday. I still have a lot of days. Good seeing you.
Bye.
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 Thanks, guys. Bye.
I think we're done. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we're
I'll
done.
stop the recording.